One. All right, so I want us to talk about close reading a little bit today. So I'm going to show you where the sample essay is, and we're going to examine it together a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and do another screen share. And then I'm going to get us, make sure that we see where that is. So I believe it's all the way back in week 6, where you have short story. Oh, no, not yet. We're in week 7 then. Okay, so in week 7, we should have our sample. Do we? Where'd it go? Yeah, oh, where'd it go? So yes, there we do. It is in week 6. I just scrolled too fast. Okay, so in week 6, you have your sample student essay. So I asked you to do a thesis paragraph and the close reading paragraph. So we're going to take a look at those today and see what they look like when they go well. Now remember, this is a sample of a student essay, so it's not perfect. It just does a pretty decent job of what I'm having you look for. But let's not pretend that every good student gets everything right? It's much easier to look back on it 2 years later and find mistakes in it than it is to write something this good. So let's cut them a break. This is a successful student essay. So this one is a battle royale, and it's saying it's starting off that thesis just by talking about the issues of voice and being heard. What would you do for your voice to be heard? Would you take a bloody beating? Would you get in a boxing ring and fight for it? And then he's talking about the 1910s being a time of racism. And then he has his thesis statement here in the middle. It's not underlined because I didn't require it in this last draft. In the short story Battle Royale, Ralph Ellison uses the battle royales going on in the 1910s to demonstrate what it took for an African American to be heard. And again, we could have workshopped that a little bit to be a little more precise. I auto-corrected for him a little bit, but there's a nice clear thesis statement. Then he spends not quite enough time talking about the research. In this essay, I will discuss a close reading of Battle Royale, the cultural connection, why the author would be writing about this issue, and lastly, other scholars who have had the same beliefs about this. This paragraph would have been a little bit stronger if he had broken, instead of using that weird and awkward list, if he had written 3 sentences there instead of just the one, would have had a little better paragraph development and a little less awkward of a sentence. And then he says he's going to begin with the close reading. Okay, so let's take a look at this. He has 2 quotes in this paragraph. He could aim for 3, but 2 gave him a pretty good paragraph, so I'm not going to pick on him for that, 2 or 3. And thinking about a double-spaced paragraph as one that takes up about a half a page, okay? In this one, his paragraph is a little bit longer, and he has 1, 2, 3, 4 quotes, but they're a little bit shorter, okay? So when I say 3 quotes, it's kind of an average. Sometimes you'll have a little more, and sometimes you'll have a little bit less, depending on how you're balancing that with your own analysis, okay? So he's trying to show us that this young man was willing to do anything to be heard, right? So he starts out in the shorts. Actually, I'm not going to read it. How about somebody else reads it for us? I'll make it even a little bit bigger. Can somebody read us this paragraph? Volunteer or be drafted? Tiara, can you read us this paragraph, please? Great, thank you. Good reading. And good writing, yes? Do we agree that they're doing a good job showing us what we're looking for? Asia, can you read us the next paragraph, please? He meant cooperative, right? Okay, beautiful reading. Now, we do see as you were reading some errors, right? He wrote corporative instead of cooperative. He's forgetting those apostrophe S's on his possessives. But let's look at what he's doing right, okay? Because I wouldn't have included this as a sample essay if there weren't more right with it than wrong with it. I didn't want to correct everything because I wanted you to see that things don't need to be perfect to be successful, but they need to be really smart. So let's look at what's here that's really smart. First, I love the way he wove just a small piece of a quote into that second sentence. As the grandfather was on his deathbed, he told him to keep up the good fight, and he gave the young man a piece of advice. That's beautiful. That's a great job weaving in a little piece of the story into his own sentence. It's smooth grammatically, it makes sense. He puts the citation at the end of the sentence, not at the end of the quote. I can tell exactly where the quote begins and ends because of the quotation marks. But otherwise, if I closed my eyes and listened to it, I wouldn't be able to tell. So that's a really good job. Now, he doesn't put analysis immediately after that first quote because it's kind of leading into his next quote, which is what the grandfather's advice was. He said, quote, comma, quote, I want you to overcome them with yeses and undermine them with grins, agree them to death and destruction, let them swallow you till they vomit or burst wide open. And I love his analysis here that this is a weird piece of advice, pretty much saying to use being very nice and cooperative as fighting tactics to achieve your goal. So he does paraphrase it a little bit, but then he moves on and talks about how the young man was eager to carry out his grandfather's wishes. And then he paraphrases a little bit. He says the grandfather's words were like a curse that continued to worry the boy's mind. Now, that's not a direct quote. He put it in his own words, but you can see he provided a citation there because he knew he was really close to the author's words, and that's really smart. So when you're close reading and you are putting it in your own words, but you're really close, offer that citation anyway, okay? And then we get our last quote at the end. Ellison writes, and he needed a comma there. Ellison writes, comma, quote, I felt safe from grandfather whose deathbed curse usually spoiled my triumphs. What a great quote to choose. The boy felt as if he had carried out his grandfather's wishes after he had had his voice heard in front of all the whites of town. And he ends the paragraph with his own analysis of what's important about the quote that he chose. So he's not ending with a quote in either of the paragraphs he does of close reading. So again, I gave you this in week 6. And I do want you to use them as a model. This is a strong thesis paragraph. It's not the best one. He could have had a little more patience with it. He has topic sentences for both of his paragraphs here instead of just diving into the text. He does a good job of getting us to see the text and see what he's saying about it. And he does a good job weaving those quotes in and around what he would like to say about them. So please remember to use this as a model as you're writing your own. If you have a printer at home, printing out that sample essay might be a really great thing to do. If not, make sure you have this open in one window and your own open in the other window so you can go back and forth really using this sample essay as a model. And we're going to go over those other paragraphs. You can see the next time he's getting into the Ferris University source for his cultural context. Now, they didn't have to do historical context, but I got in trouble for not asking them to do it. So I had to add it to yours. So we didn't have enough sources in our papers last year. Theirs is one source shorter than yours is in that sample essay. So just be aware of that. I was asked to correct that. I was apparently too easy on them in my first semester of teaching that class. Okay. I'm going to stop the share and ask if there are questions about how to use that model successfully. Right, because a number alone in parentheses is assumed to be a page number. And we don't need the author's name because you've already introduced the author really carefully, okay, in the paragraph. So we know that we're talking about Ellison and Battle Royale. So all we really need is that number. We don't need a P or a PG or a page or anything like that, because if we see a number by itself, we assume that's a page number. Okay, if it's not a page number, that's when we offer an abbreviation like line in poetry or paragraph if you're using the Alice Walker. Great question. Other questions about using this as a model? You're getting ready for your whole essay. So the one thing that I wish he had done a little better was slowing down this is going to be a research essay. He did it in one listing sentence, and I would prefer you guys took a couple of sentences to introduce what your paper is going to cover. It's going to cover historical context, cultural context, some biography, and a close reading. But you don't have to squash all that into one long, awkward listing sentence. That student loved his long, awkward listing sentences, but I would like you to improve on that. He has it there. He did. Now, some students forgot entirely to predict what the essay was going to contain. They just forgot that step entirely. So I did include his, but you can do it better by just having a little more patience and using a couple of sentences for that. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, those are the jobs of a thesis paragraph. Now, if you're doing them in a non-research essay, you would do about like 2 to 3 sentences for each job, and then just one sentence for the thesis paragraph and one sentence to get us ready for the next body paragraph. Here, it might be a little longer than 10 sentences, and that's okay. But do kind of think of it as offering maybe 2 or 3 sentences for each of the jobs that aren't a one-sentence job. There are 2 jobs there that are one-sentence jobs. The thesis statement is a one-sentence job, and the get us ready for the close reading is a one-sentence job. So for the others, think about taking maybe 2 or 3 sentences for each of those jobs, and that should be a pretty reasonable sized paragraph, okay, that doesn't get totally out of hand. We like to have paragraphs have enough, but sometimes they run away with us and this used to happen to me. I would try to tell so much of what I was going to tell that I was trying to summarize my whole essay in one paragraph at the top. And although it is kind of a preview of it, it's more just kind of getting us ready for it. So we don't want to watch a movie preview that takes half as long as the movie. And we don't want to watch a thesis paragraph that's like 2 pages long, right? So that list is there to help you make sure you hit all the jobs, but also to make sure you don't include stuff you don't need, right? These are great questions so far. Are there other questions? Worries, concerns? All right, you did really well with your close readings of the poems. It's a lot like that again. So we're just kind of using that same close reading skill, and then we're going to add to it once we've done it. Now, I did say you could add a third paragraph of close reading if you want to, if you don't feel like you've gotten enough out, or if you feel like your paragraphs are getting really, really long. Instead of having really long paragraphs, maybe break one of the really longs into 2. It's okay to, this isn't a magic number. It's a minimum number, right? But remember that there's a lot more paper to come. So don't get too carried away with the close reading. We don't want it to take over and be a whole, it's not a whole 5-page paper all by itself, right? The close reading is just the beginning. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. But you can have a third paragraph if you don't feel that you've covered everything. Should you be looking things up to tell you how to understand the story? Not in the close readings, y'all. In the close readings, you are using the text and your brain. Okay, so make sure that you're sticking just to that. You can be reading the historical context and cultural context and biography, and it can inform your understanding, but here in this assignment, it should be you and the primary text, and that is it. Okay, I don't want to see anybody helping you with this close reading except our class discussion, right? Our class discussion can inform you, your brain can inform you, what your peers have said in discussion boards can inform you. But right now, in this assignment, thesis paragraph and 2 close readings, it's you and the text. And that by that, I mean the short story text that you've chosen to work with. Okay. I'm going to stop recording because I think these are the essentials, but I want us to chit chat about what we're working on. So let me just, I'm going to pause this. We'll be done recording.